best way to understand agentic AI is through an example. So I'm going to work here in the Claude code framework. So this is what you get if you download this directly from Anthropic or Claude. And we go into the code tab here. And here you can type in questions which you want your agentic AI, that is Claude, to answer. I've created a reasonably simple example of survivorship of a small number of mice that are either controls or they have been treated for cancer. And what's shown is over a number of days, what days those mice died. Now I realize this is a bit of a morbid data set, but it's a realistic medical research data set. Now, what I do in Agentic AI is I just go in and I actually say, the first thing to do, I've made the CSV of the data, and you might have collected this from an experiment. And then I tell it, well, please look at the cancer treatment CSV and show me its contents. And it's reproduced here what's actually in the CSV. And it's given a few little kind of insights into it, looking at the different numbers. And this is what I think is very interesting about Agentic AI. It's very enthusiastic. So as soon as I've put it in, I've just, please look at it. It's suggested what I can do next. This is because just like every other social media or AI company, Anthropic are trying to engage you with their product and get you moving in some direction that they think they can help you more. They want to sort of encourage you through engagement. But the suggestion at the same time, I'm complaining about the engagement, but at the same time, these are reasonable suggestions. But I'm just going to take it a little bit easy. And I think that's what you should see. You should see Claude as this kind of enthusiastic dog that wants to please you and do things with you all the time. But you don't always need to follow it. You should actually be taking the lead and telling it what to do. So I go on and I say, well, these are data from the survival of mice in laboratory conditions. I've got a spelling mistake there, but it doesn't matter. It manages to pick through your spelling mistakes. And I give it some context. And then it makes 3 suggestions of things I might like to do. Kaplan-Meier survival curves, a log rank test. But what we'll do, this is a pretty standard test. So what we'll do is we'll follow along the test it would like to do. I'm a professor of applied mathematics, so I know that this is actually going to be a good test, so I don't really have any concerns about this. Kaplan-Meier plots and the log rank test. But I do have a concern here, and I say, well, the controls are different, so don't pull them together. And then it comes up with this idea of comparing the treatments to the controls, but I also want to compare the treatment 1 to treatment 2 in this experiment. Again, very enthusiastic dog. I haven't told it to do anything. And this is, I think, where you can see the difference between the generative AI and the agentic AI. So generative AI will just give you a suggested action, while the agentic AI, it's an agent, it has agency. You can see, I don't think it has real like human agency, but it has AI agency. And it will start to go ahead and do it. So it's immediately, when I asked it, I want to compare treatment 1 and treatment 2, it's made the Kaplan-Meier survival curves. So I'll have a look at them there. And you can see there's one in treatment 1, which is the best treatment. Only 2 of the mice die and the others survive to the end. And it also does a test. So that's the Kaplan-Meier. The log rank test is a test of survival. It tests if the underlying rate at which the mice are dying is different, or it tests if they're the same. That's the null hypothesis that they're the same, and it gives you the p-value which can reject the null hypothesis. So it has a few takeaways here. If we have a look at this, it says treatment 1 significantly outperforms both controls and treatment 2. That was my key question. And so there's 5 of 7 mice still alive at the end of the study. So that's the striking result. And it's picked that out nicely, and it's given us a statistical test which justifies that. Now, you're definitely not done there. There's going to be some more stages. It asks me one thing here. It says, one caveat, I assume that the 5 surviving mice were censored after day 32. I just tell it the study ended at 50 days, and it reruns, and it generates a new plot now, where the end of the study is 50 days. Let's dig just a little bit deeper into what actually went on within this session. If I look here, so, when it first ran the command, read the cancer treatment CSV, you can actually see how it's making different function calls. It's calling different functions in order to load in the files, find the files and load in the files. So this is the command where it loaded in the file. So this is one of the agentic things you can say it's doing. And then it reads in the CSV, which is the data itself that we want to look at. And then most of the other things was like question and answer. So you can think of that as the generative AI, where it's answering the questions. As I told you, it was very keen to get going with this because it knows it's got all of these tools at its disposal. And here is where the key running was done. And this is the first thing it did is it looked up my graph style. We're actually going to come back to graph styles later, but it looked up the style I like to have graphs in when I'm using Claude. I'll come back how to make that in the next video. And then it found that it actually wanted to use this lifelines package, which it identified as the Python package, which was best at dealing with these types of problems. It found it wasn't installed. Then it tried to install, and eventually it did manage to install the lifelines package. Again, the agent won't bother you with those details. It will just go ahead and do what it thinks needs to be done in order to get your analysis ready. And this is, of course, where it's saving you lots of time as a researcher, because you don't have to sit there installing all of these packages, working out which package to use. It's actually finding those things for you. And then it created the survival analysis.py code, which it runs to find the answer. So when you see the graph isn't somehow generated directly from the data. What the agent does is it first writes the code to generate it, and then once it's written the code, it runs that code. In fact, it's kind of hard coded the data in here, which maybe isn't the best thing. You might want to load it, but anyway, for this example, it's hard coded the data in, and it has made the plot and done the test directly on the data that it's loaded in. And so I think it's very instructive. You should do a little example yourself. And then it's also, it's got this output here. So you should do a little example yourself where you go into the detail, you look at the code that it's generating and find out what's going on behind the scenes. So that's the basic analysis. What I'm going to do in the next video is talk a little bit about the graph styles, and we're going to learn how to create skills which allow you to repeat things. We've already seen this a bit in my plotting skills. And then we're going to go deeper. Once we've plotted things and we're happy, we're actually going to go deeper and push Claude a little bit more about things that it might have missed in its analysis.